Hello, hello, hello. How are you guys doing today? Okay, I wanted to jump on here and do a quick video about some updates that are going on with the investigation at Fox Hollow Farms, which was the home of Herb Baumeister, the serial killer that lives in Indianapolis, or lived in Indianapolis, Indiana. So for those of you that do not know, my name is Peter Monn. I live in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I have heavily covered the Fox Hollow Farms case, the victims that died at Fox Hollow Farms at the hands of Herb Baumeister, conspiracy theories. I've covered the documentaries about him, the numerous documentaries that have been made, the most recent documentary that has been made about him, Playground of a Serial Killer. I covered that extensively over on my Peter Watches TV channel. I have gone to Fox Hollow Farms. I did a paranormal investigation there on my vlog channel, Peter Vlogs. It is my highest viewed vlog over there, which is kind of crazy. I know everything about this case inside and out. I am regularly sent tips about this. People send me information, and I've had so many people reach out to me about this case, of which I typically turn over. If it's anything that I haven't heard before, I just turned over to law enforcement or people that are in the know. So I have now probably at this point, if I had to guess, with all the videos on all the different channels that I've made, over here alone, I've probably made 10 or 15 videos, if not more, about Fox Hollow Farms. And I've talked about everything that I know about it. There was a time, I think it was around probably the last time that I made my last video about it. And at the same time, I was kind of covering the Delphi case as well, because both cases happened in Indiana. The Fox Hollow Farms case felt very, very personal to me on some level, because at the time that Herb Baumeister was hunting for victims was the same time that I was going out to gay bars in Indianapolis. It was something that we talked about. I remember watching the very first A&E documentary special about Herb Baumeister with my roommate back in the day. I can remember us talking about it when we would go out to bars and things like that. And so for me, this is like, I'm not alone in this. I mean, it's not like I had any personal interactions, but it felt very personal because I was part of the community that he was, hunting at that time for victims. And so I've always kind of had an interest in this case specifically. I also have felt through the years that this case has never really gotten the attention that it deserved. When you look at the amount of victims that they speculate that Herb Baumeister had, which I've heard different numbers from different people. People speculate that there's like 19 to 20. Other people speculate, because he could also be the I-70 killer, that there is as many as 60 to 70 victims. They are continuing to always find bones, bone fragments in the woods and in the creeks. The Monn Creek runs, and the Monn Trail runs right behind the house. They are always finding bone fragments and things like that out there. So they do not believe that they have anywhere near established how many victims Herb Baumeister actually had. They also do not know if it was just Herb Baumeister alone or if he was working with a group of people. I've talked about that heavily in past videos. I will not get into that today because I just want to talk about this update that he did. But there's so much that goes on about this. And if you watched the documentary, which was called Playground of a Serial Killer, which was fantastically done. In there, they talk about the amount of bone fragments that they have and evidence that they have not identified yet is more than almost the number that was in the 9/11 tragedy that occurred. When you think about it on that level, the fact that Herb Baumeister and also the Fox Hollow Farm and all that kind of stuff has not gotten that much attention through the years. And if you've watched my other videos, you know there's a lot of speculation. I've had people reach out to me. I've talked a lot about it in the past, about how in Indianapolis at that time, a lot of the reason why it didn't get the attention that it did was because it was gay men that were being killed. And so from law enforcement and things like that, there was a push down to not look into this. There's also been a lot of speculation that this is a huge cover-up and that people in very powerful positions were possibly involved in all of this, or that it was part of Hamilton County, which is a wealthier suburb and higher, academics and things like that. Sports, all the schools are centered around academics and sports. And so all of a sudden, if we had this serial killer that was from Hamilton County, people would not want to move to Hamilton County. And so there was this suggestion that they were trying to kind of keep it low and hidden for a long time without coming out and talking about it. I actually the reason I started talking about it again was because I just made some random video years and years and years ago talking about how I might have met a serial killer. And then I saw a documentary on YouTube. It was very poorly done, but I think it's one of the scariest documentaries. And it's called The Haunting of Fox Hollow Farms. John Lorden Arts had actually covered it. I love his work. And he had actually covered it. And so I think I watched it before then, and that's maybe how I found him or something like that. And so I kind of got interested in it again and looking into it. And then I had people that reached out to me and said, do you want to do this paranormal investigation? And then I went out there. And then I had met a friend of mine at a 12-step meeting who my friend Tanya had said, it's a good thing that you guys never went out there. And he's like, don't you remember we went out there for after party? I had no clue. I didn't remember it at all. That would have been during my drinking years. And so there was all this like mystery and intrigue around it to me. But always my purpose has been to reconnect the victim stories with their loved ones and to be able to identify the loved ones. I know that I saw online recently that they are going to continue the story. And so with the documentary, and they are actually looking for people in the community in Indianapolis. I think I saw it on like the Pride page for Indianapolis, that if anybody is wanting to speak about this. So if you're watching this and you don't know how to get connected to anybody, that if you want to tell your story, if you have any connection to her Baumeister or anything that you might have known and you want to tell your story, you can reach out to me and you can direct message me or email me, and I will get you in touch with the person that I saw post that. I also know other people. If you have information, you can also reach out to Coroner Jellison, the Hamilton County Coroner's office. Or if you want me to help you get into contact with that, I can give you the information if you email me or message me somehow. But I started yesterday, so that's the history. People know that I have been so intrigued with this case. Personally, okay, I believe there was a lot of conspiracy and cover-up. I believe it was not just her Baumeister. I believe that it was a lot of people involved. And I thought that for a very long time. There's a lot of backstory. I probably, at this point, in the last year and a half alone, I've probably made 10 videos on this. So you can go back and watch those videos. Just put in my name. I'm not going to link them all. Just put my name in and put Fox Hollow Farms, and they will come up. Put Peter Monn, Fox Hollow Farms, and they'll come up. So people know that I'm very interested in this case. People ask me a lot about what I think about Richard Allen and the Delphi case. I'm very interested in that case too. I think that's a huge cover-up as well. And I've explained a lot about the culture of Indiana, the culture of the Midwest, and talking about both of those cases. Yesterday, I had one person that sent it to me, a friend of mine, and then another friend of mine sent it to me, and then it was like within an hour, I had like probably 5 or 6 people send it to me. And then last night, in my direct messages and through today, I've got sent 2 things exclusively in my direct messages on Instagram, which is the only social media that I use, other than Facebook. And that is, but don't contact me on Facebook, I don't read my messages, is this person that is moving their fern inside for the 14th year, because I keep all my ferns on the front porch and move them inside in the winter. And the other thing is this update on the Fox Hollow Farms case that was written by the Crime Junkies podcast. I've been sent this, honest to God, no exaggeration, probably by 30 or 40 people at this point. So I was like, okay, I'm going to jump on here and I am going to give a little update. What's interesting about this is I don't really know why this is getting a lot of attention, because there's really no update, but we'll get to that in just a second. So this was the post that I was sent. I saw it on Facebook as well from the Crime Junkie podcast. Breaking. The Hamilton County, I put it up here somewhere. The Hamilton County Coroner's Office and the University of Indianapolis, who's in charge of doing the genetic testing on the DNA from the remains. The University of Indianapolis' Human Identification Center returned to Fox Hollow Farm on October 18th for a targeted excavation after 2 cadaver dogs independently alerted to the same area. No additional human remains were found, but officials say this marks a significant step forward in the ongoing investigation. Hamilton County Coroner Jeff Jellison, who was heavily shown in the documentary, says they remain committed to finding answers. Okay, part of the problem that people worry about is that Jeff Jellison's term as county coroner is not forever. And so if at some point he would not be the county coroner anymore in Hamilton County, would the next coroner continue to investigate heavily the Fox Hollow Farm case or be as committed to it as Jeff Jellison is? Okay, because this case has been something, I mean, we're talking, I think that her Baumeister died in 1996. So we're talking that 1996, I believe, is when he passed away. He took his own life after the investigators got onto Fox Hollow Farms. So you're talking 30 years ago that this happened, right? It was 95 or 96. So 30 years ago this happened, and it's just in the last 2 years getting the attention for the victims. I mean, some of those victims have not been identified until like the last 2 years. Now, the reason why the importance of the cadaver dogs going out there is because the last couple times the cadaver dogs have gone out there, they have identified, I think they identified one person a year ago and one person a year before. So it's one of the reasons why they continue to take cadaver dogs out there, okay? When I went out there and we met with the owner and things like that, which I have a lot to say about that, but I shared in other videos. We're not going to get into this today. I'm going to try to keep this quick. The owner said to us that they find things out there all the time. Constantly are finding bone fragments, things like that all the time. Her Baumeister had a burn pile that he kept in the woods behind his house. And so they don't even know possibly like where in the woods. At that time that the Fox Hollow Farms was out there, it was like a lone estate. There weren't really that many houses out there. It's off of like 191st, way north of Indianapolis. So it was kind of alone out there. When you go out there today, there is something that is called the Monn Trail, which actually goes all the way up to Delphi. That was the bridge, the Monn Bridge. But anyway, it's a walking path, a biking path. People walk their dogs, they run on it, they walk on it. And it goes from the south side of Indianapolis all the way to the north side of Indianapolis. It's been a project that they've been working on for almost 30 years. So now the Monn path runs right beside, I mean, literally if you're standing on their property, you can see the Monn path. So people are walking by every day, Fox Hollow Farms. Not only that, the last time that I drove out there, which I think was 2 or 3 years ago with a friend of mine that was visiting, we drove out there. I couldn't even find Fox Hollow Farms. I mean, we had to slow down and drive. We drove by it like twice because we couldn't even find it. Because when she was like driving, I was like, I know it's like here somewhere. Because before, when you drive by it, it just sat out there alone. Now there are probably 5 or 6 different housing developments around it. Not only that, but Fox Hollow Farms, the estate, still sits out there, but it's a gated estate. So when you enter it's a private estate. When you drive onto the estate, okay, where they used to have horses and a horse barn, there are now like 3 probably $1 million homes sitting on the property of Fox Hollow Farms. So you go down the driveway and Fox Hollow Farms, the house sits that you see in all the pictures and stuff. It sits at the end of the property, okay, and up against the woods. But to the left-hand side as you're driving down the driveway are 3 or 4 like $1 million homes on the property of Fox Hollow Farms. I mean, I don't know if those, I mean, I wouldn't want to live on that property, but more power to you. The houses are gorgeous and they also own this property. So, it's interesting to me that they continue. So they bring cadaver dogs out there because they have, like, I think a year ago, they identified the most recent victim that was identified. And so they continue to be able to like identify victims. And now because the case is getting so much attention, people are finally like saying, oh my God, I lost a loved one back then. There's also, I think one of the things that people need to remember is that this happened in the late 80s, early 90s. The stigma back then, I mean, I can remember so many friends of mine coming out and like their friends or their family and some of their friends just being like, we don't want anything to do with you. Don't ever speak to us again. You're gay. We are done with you as a family member and friends as well. It was a time, I mean, we're kind of going back to this a little bit where people were losing their jobs because they were gay. I can remember many friends of mine in Indiana that lost their jobs because they were gay. They would just go in one day and they would be fired from jobs. And that was, we lived in a no-fault state. And so, I mean, it was a very, very scary time to be out in Indiana. And at that time, a lot of family members were they were done. I mean, we live in the Bible Belt of the United States. People were just done with if their kids came out to them. So at that time, there was also this stigma that a lot of the people that were being taken and being murdered were sex workers, that a lot of them were like on the street, that they were homeless and things like that. And so a lot of the families never came forward because they just assumed that they didn't have a relationship with these people either. Now it's all these years later, it's 30 years later, you know, we live in a lot of people are more liberal than they were back then as far as when it comes to people coming out or acceptance of gay people and the LGBTQI plus community and the LGBTQI plus people and their families. Some aren't. And I have to stress that it scares the hell out of me that a lot of mentality is the way that it was or even worse than when I came out in 1990. But it's in some ways, I think especially with siblings, So one of the things that you see is a lot of the victims' siblings are coming forward now and maybe giving DNA samples the way that they wouldn't. So we are being able to identify something. Well, I'm not in it, but the authorities are being able to identify victims in a way that they weren't able to 30 years ago because there were no DNA samples to compare it to, which is why it's so important that people come forward if you think that you maybe lost a family member or a friend back in the day. I went into this because I wanted to look a little bit more further into this because I thought, well, just because they have cadaver dogs out there, that's not... And they're saying that they're committed to finding things out there. Is there any more than that? So I looked up an article. There's an article on WRTV, which is a local news station. And the article says, investigators return to Fox Hollow Farm in search of remains. The farm is where suspected serial killer Herb Baumeister allegedly killed dozens of men in the 1990s. And this is from, hold on a second, October 21st, 2025. So yesterday. Westfield, Indiana, which is where Fox Hollow Farm sits. Investigators were back at a Westfield farm over the weekend searching for remains of victims killed decades ago. Hamilton County Coroner Jeff Jellison said teams returned to Fox Hollow Farm Saturday, October 18th, to excavate an area where cadaver dogs alerted during a recent assessment. The farm is where suspected serial killer Herb Baumeister allegedly killed dozens of men in the 1990s. But officials say crews found no additional remains during the... This is one of the reasons why I was like, why is this getting so much attention right now? And I'll explain it in a second. But officials say crews found no additional remains during the most recent search, and the investigation into the 30-year-old case continues. Baumeister is suspected of ending the lives of at least 25 young men, and investigators believe he could be behind the disappearance of many more. So they're citing the number as 25. I've heard numbers as high as 60 to 70, like I said. As police honed in on Baumeister the summer of 1996, that's when he passed away, following his own son's discovery of a skull in the family's backyard that actually happened several years before that. The once prominent businessman fled across the Canadian border and ended his own life. There have been 10,000 bones and bone fragments found in Westfield where investigators believe Baumeister killed dozens of men. 10 of those victims have been identified so far. In August, Jellison said 3 more victims are on the verge of identification, either in genealogy or the final stages of DNA work. Earlier this year, Jellison's office was joined by Gen Genies, a nonprofit investigative genetic genealogy firm, in an attempt to identify more victims faster. The trained team of 8 volunteers essentially worked genetic puzzles to identify the unknown. They offered to work the Baumeister case for free. We will look forward to helping. Gene Genie's executive director, Britta Brewer, said, the goal is to get people identified. That's it. I've actually talked to Jeff Jellison. He is fantastic, and he is super committed to identifying as many victims as he possibly can, and I think that that's really the goal. At this time, I think there's a lot of intrigue. Fox Hollow Farms has an interest in paranormal around it, which is always good. And people ask me all the time, what do I think about that? I think if it gets people interested in it enough, that enough people keep on talking about it, that eventually we find and are able to identify as many victims as possible, then I think that let's just keep people interested so people keep on talking about it. So that more victims are identified and more families can find some kind of closure to it or answers to what happened to their loved ones. And that's ultimately what I think about. And that's what I ultimately care about the most, is that the victims' stories are told once and for all and that their families have some answers. So anyway, there's the update on it. The reason why it's important that the cadaver dogs continue to go out there is just because they didn't find anything this time does not mean that they won't find something next time. I've been in those woods. Those woods are heavily deep. They border all kinds of stuff. And the where the burn pile was and where it moved, and there's a lot of, it's a lot of land out there. So just because they didn't find anything this time doesn't mean that they're not going to find something next time. And the fact that they're continuing to be committed to this investigation 30 years later, I think that's admirable, and I hope that they continue. Anyway, let me know what you think about all that in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.